Welcome, Lights Out family, to another episode of After Dark with KK. This is the third and final story I will be adapting from the excellent book by Naoki Den. Thank you for the support and response from the previous installments. There have been feedback that the stories have been too short. This magnus opus, well, at least for me at this juncture, hope this narration of 28 minutes will keep you satisfied. So sit back and enjoy. Prank call. Sano came from a prominent medical family. Since young, he had been burdened with the aspirations of being a doctor that would rival the achievement of his own parents. However, young Sano did not crumble under such immense pressure. He had been doing well in elementary, middle high, and high school. The only stumbling block would be his constant need to vent his stress from examinations, leading him to went on a hooligan spree like gang fight, bike racing, etc. under the facade of a model student. Eventually, he inclined towards doing absurd pranks on his own, and during some late-night cycling routes, he stumbled into telephone booths either in the parks or near the train stations and began flipping through the thick yellow pages telephone book, randomly choosing some telephone numbers and started doing prank calls. There was an evolution of Sano's prank calling routine. It started with nerves catching up on him and usually kept quiet, and when the receiver realized he or she had been pranked, this would usually lead to a curse before a fuming hang-up. Sano actually thought he was doing a good job allowing people to vent their frustrations from their everyday lives. The next stage of this evolution involved Sano coming out with some nonsense dialogue like, "What you had for dinner tonight? What is the time now?" which naturally riled up the unknowing, half-awake victims that led to more explicit reactions at the end of the line, leading to more entertainment for the twisted fetish of Sano. Eventually, Sano got addicted to doing prank calls on nightly basis, and he evolved to his ultimate stage by orchestrating eerie lines to make the skin of his victims crawl.
I am so lonely. I am downstairs and I come up to look for you.
Such irksome lines, added with some acting, heavy breathing, and well-rehearsed falsetto. The natural response of his victims brought him immense pleasure, which led him to getting a kick from this addiction. Until one fateful call. The voice on the other end was a young lady. Sano's interest peaked to the highest level. With his best scary voice,
I am at your door. Can you let me in?
he was anticipating a shriek or a scream that would reach its climax if she would drop the phone. Instead, there was no response from her until a few seconds of pondering before she calmly said,
Okay.
She then hung up the phone. That was not according to the plan, Sano thought to himself. In fact, he suddenly felt like a jilted admirer who he could not let this down. If not, it would bother him for the rest of the night. He dialed the same number again, and it did not take long for the familiar voice to emanate from the other end of the line.
I am so cold. Let me in.
Sano exerted all his acting ability like a vengeful soul, with even sound effects to drum up the scare. Once again, there was no feathers ruffled, just a wailful snicker from the lady. This time, Sano felt it became personal and was thinking on how to retaliate, but the cold tone of the line hanging up shook him out of his thoughts. He started to feel offended, while wondering did he underperform. He followed up with a third dial, and this time he vowed to get her into submission. However, unlike the previous two calls, the transmission of the ringing seems very much different. There was no picking up tone as anticipated, except a crystal clear voice merely seconds when he made the call.
I will come look for you.
Sano felt like he had been outpranked, but he had no time to ponder about his strange encounter, as he could hear cycling on the asphalt as he saw a patrolling policeman approaching the booth in a distance. Feeling a bit guilty from his prank calls, Sano starting to get flustered and begin to distance from his place of crime. Just as he cycled a few yards away from the phone booth, he felt he saw a lady in white appearing at the side of the booth, peering into the lit-up booth like looking for something or someone within. As curiosity engulfed Sano while he was paddling idly, he could see the lady in white turning her direction towards him. The whole street was well lit with street lamps, but somehow he could not make up any facial features. Her face was like a black abyss. As the mysterious lady seemingly turned and chased towards him, Sano felt a strong flight instinct and he sped on his bike all the way home without the urge to turn his head back to check on his pursuer. In no time, he was back at the protection of his home and he just laughed at his wild imagination before dozing off. After the strange incident, Sano also started to shake off the urge to indulge in doing prank calls. Sano generally had forgotten about this eerie incident until, under the influence of alcohol, he shared it in an university group outing which naturally piqued the interest of the girls and the guys alike. While Sano was still shaken by that prank call that ends it all, a young chap like him was still easily triggered by his peers. He passed the number to an university mate, Marui, and told him to try emulating the prank call, while the rest of the group date would be hiding somewhere nearby. It was barely 5 minutes when Marui stepped out of the phone booth nonchalantly.
It's a date number,
Marui announced to the rest. It was a bit of a wet blanket for the group, and they cajoled another chap by the name of Takashima to try his luck. Like Marui, Takashima did not take too long and had no joy with the number and wandered out of the phone booth. However, Takashima started confronting the group saying,
Whoever tried to scare me just now, you are doing a shoddy job.
"Who? We were all hiding at the same corner."
Really? I felt like I could sense a lady stabbing my soul from outside the booth when I was in the midst of dialing.
At this juncture, Marui felt compelled to say that he also felt the same way, but brushed it off thinking he might be drunk. When figuring out that Takashima was not pulling everyone's leg, the girls started to get a big spook out. Sano felt he had to intervene and urge both Takashima and Marui by saying that it was just for fun and round the group for another drinks session at a nearby bar. What? Marui had a car accident? This piece of news shook Sano a week after that fateful night. As everyone was busy with their school and part-time jobs, the gang decided to visit Marui on their own. However, the day when Sano came into Marui's hospital ward, Takashima was also there.
That phone number was creepy, no?
Takashima asked. This knocked the soul out of Sano's body, and he started to gather cold sweat. What made Sano realize the prank call was legit spooky was Marui's account on how he got hurt. A couple of days after the group prank call, Marui had a long day at his part-time job and decided to take a shortcut back home, which involved him walking into a dark alley, albeit being reluctant to. The moment he turned into the alley, he could feel a pair of eyes affixed at him. He picked up his speed on instinct, and he could distinctly hear a pair of bare feet chasing him down. Flustered, a fatigued Murai ran for his life and did not notice an onrushing motorbike when he came out of the dark alley, which ran him over and broke his right leg. The creepiest thing was that on the same day, Takashima encountered something similar. While riding his bicycle back home, Takashima similarly could hear a pair of bare feet running towards him. When he turned to quell his curiosity, he was halted by a patrol policeman. He was questioned on whether he had a pillion rider, a long-haired lady to be specific. Pillion riding on a bicycle in Japan is illegal, and the questioning from the policeman drew a lot of question marks from Takashima, who of course rebutted, and said that he just came from his part-time job, leading a perturbed policeman letting him go. The strange ongoings did not stop when Takashima reached home. The motion sensor activated corridor light suddenly turned on, which led to Takashima to peek out through the window to see a shadow seemingly standing outside his apartment. This made a startled Takashima to open the door to find no one there. However, the corridor light did not switch off, indicating there was still someone looking around. At this point, Takashima just had to laugh at himself for thinking too much. After hearing both accounts, Sano could feel the goosebumps on the back of his neck raising in an alarming state. He also compelled to tell the pair the truth behind the scary prank call. The three made a pact not to divulge too much of the prank call moving forward, and not to tempt fate, knowing this was too much of a creepy coincidence. From that day, the three also forged a deep companionship, especially their collective objective to enter a decent medical college. Even after Murai had discharged, the trio went to a well-known shrine for a cleansing session. After the college entry examinations, Sano and Murai managed to enter a reputable medical college in Tokyo, while Takashima himself did decently well by entering college not too bad in the capital as well. The three rented an apartment at the outskirts of the capital city, and one of the common group activity when they were not too busy with both work and school was hanging out at a nearby 24-hour convenience store, drinking and trashing out all the brutalities of school and life on the whole. Also at the convenience store, the three of them met up with a pair of fellow undergrads from the rural prefecture of Iwate, namely Asayama and Numada. The pair haunting from northern Honshu always felt they came from the origin of yokai, which means demons and other related scary beings, and were always eager to prove that they are ready to handle the scariest situations ever. Despite reluctant to talk about the prank call incident, but under the influence of alcohol, in addition to constant ribbing by the Iwate pair, they decided to school them with their spine-chilling experience. Yet, their newfound friends were unfazed. However, it drew the interest of the outlet manager of the convenience store. The manager's interest drew strange looks among Sano and his friends. On the surface, the manager looked like your typical jaded Tokyo middle-aged man. Even as the trio took turns to narrate their spooky encounters, he barely revealed any tinge of facial expressions. At the end of a lengthy string of narrations, the manager just calmly responded with a telephone number.
Is that the number?
How the hell he got it? Even before they could respond, the manager went ahead with his own experience. In his youth, likely 20 to 30 years ago, manager's son was like Sano, a juvenile delinquent, always looking to create some silly shenanigans, and prank calls was his forte. When he hit the same number, a coarse, male voice picked up the call, not a female voice. The clarity of the other end of the line was awful, but manager's son was able to make out words like describing directions to him. Initially, he could not make out what was being transpired, but when he finally did reckon what has been said, it was all too late. The manager's residence was not too far away from the train station. Moving forward from the main entrance, there was a junction where you could turn right. If you go up a slope, you'll reach a nice park where there was a telephone booth. This was where he was at that night. Upon the rude awakening, the young manager squinted his eyes to make out a tall man in a three-piece suit. He could not make out his face, but the chilly part was that he was certain the strange man was smiling. The scratchy voice in the line suddenly turned into an eerie voice.
I found you.
The young manager's instinct to flee was turned on, and adrenaline overwhelmed him as he dashed back home, barely 10 minutes away from the telephone booth. Every time he turned his head to check on his surprised assailant, he could see the creepy smiling man moving in incredulous speed, like closing in at every street lamppost. But the young manager was still able to reach home unharmed. But in the middle of the night, the telephone at home started ringing incessantly. Of course, he dare not pick up. But the strangest thing is no one at home could hear the ringing and no one responded to it. The late night ringing persisted for a week, and only young manager could hear it and no one else at home could. Then one day, it stopped ringing. Tragically, his younger sister went missing on the same day. The night before, his sister and her friends went on a late night karaoke session, and two of her friends accompanied her home and swore they saw her safely enter the house before they left. The last words they said left a mark in his memory. They told the family they could clearly hear the telephone ringing that night. After the manager finished his story, the Tokyo trio was left dumbfounded, but on the other end of the spectrum, the Iwate pair just laughed like they heard an absurd story that did not really make them scared at all. Their reaction pissed everyone off, but the manager calmly said,
I know exactly where this number can be picked up. You guys want to go?
Sure, why not? Anyway, we are bored.
The manager told his staff that he would be back in a jiffy, and then called for a cab that could accommodate 6 persons, which brought the 5 of them and himself to the wretched location. As the cab was nearing the destination, Sano and his friends could vividly saw a signage for a cemetery, meaning the telephone booth was in the middle of a graveyard, and they started to get panic. Even the Iwate pair was getting uneasy of their location. Numada said,
It must be a prank from the manager.
When they alighted from the cab, Asayama immediately beckoned the gang to make a call to see if the manager was pulling a prank. Sano, Murai, and Takashima was very hesitant, and in no time, Numada pulled out his own mobile and proclaimed he will do it, and at the same time, sniggering at the rest for being too weak-willed. Not long after he made the call, everyone could hear the ringing sound emanating from the booth, and for Sano and his friends, their blood ran cold. Numada had a sullen look in an instant.
What's wrong?
It was an invalid number. Got a message from the telephone company.
Then why was the phone still ringing? Could it be an NTT issue?
Just as the group was wrapped in bewilderment, Asayama stepped into the booth and picked up the telephone handle before anyone could stop him. It was not too long before he came back to join the group. So who was on the line?
Gibberish and scratchy line. Just some words. R-O-E-K.
No one could understand the meaning of the words. Felt like it could be intercepted line from some other wavelengths. Told you guys the manager is just pulling our leg, Numada exclaimed. At this point, the manager could not be found, and the 5 of them decided to just call it a night. A week later, Sano got a call from Numada. What? Asayama is dead? The Tokyo trio were well shaken, but all agreed to take off from school to attend Asayama's funeral in his hometown in Iwate. They reunited with Numada, who told them how Asayama would act strangely the next couple of days after the cemetery telephone call, and went home without informing Numada. Then one night, Asayama left home similarly without informing anyone before local police informed his family that he had committed suicide in a hotel in the town. Of asphyxiation by wrapping tight a telephone cord around his neck using the doorknob as a fixed point. Aggrieved and shaken from the tragic death of their comrade, the 4 of them went to a nearby convenience store after the funeral procession has completed. The location eerily was similar where they first acquainted in Tokyo, and of course the conversation would lead to the strange call that night. Aoi-ka, what does that mean? Aoi, which means blue in Japanese. Why not yellow or white? While trying to quell the solemn atmosphere, Marui joked around and bit his own tongue, causing him to stutter. Of course, the others started to laugh at their friend's misfortune before they had a rude realization. It's not Aoi-ka. It's Atomika. 3 more days. While the rest was stunned, Numada told them it was exactly 2 days after that night when Asayama went back home before ending his life a day later. Suddenly, rage took over Numada. He picked up a metal rod near where they were and wanted to smash a public telephone booth out of pique. At this moment, the phone in the booth started ringing. What the hell? This is Iwate, not Tokyo. Can't be that coincidental. Numada picked up the phone and started lambasting. Say again, what 2 more days? After that, Numada had to be stopped short of being incriminated for vandalism while he started whacking the phone with the rod he picked up. The 3 of them then escorted Numada back home and managed to quell his rage. When his parents welcomed them in, they decided to unload all these strange and creepy ongoings. Instead of being skeptical of what they have heard, the parents brought them to a traditional Japanese shrine these city boys had only seen in the movies or television. The shrine belongs to an Itako, traditional witch ladies from the northern Honshu. Entering a main hall, Numada's face was engraved in fear, while they were being welcomed by an old lady speaking a thick local dialect and her young assistant cum translator. Even before Numada's parents could tell her the full story, the old Itako was already passing instructions to her assistant. Not long after, the younger Itako came in with a bow without a quiver of arrows. The elder Itako started interrogating in her dialect, with Numada shaking his head vigorously and the city boys befuddled with the exchanges.
Grandma asked if you boys played any sort of soul summoning games.
Asked the young translator.
She said you guys were emitting an aura of death, especially him.
Pointing at Numada.
Such an aura is only present on dead people or people at the brink of death. So in order to save you, please be honest with us.
Numada's parents then used the local dialect and gave the old Itako the full account of the chain of events, and her brows furrowed as she grasped more of the gist of the story. She relayed to the young translator, who told the quartet.
For us, Itako, if you summon souls like what you guys have done, you also need to summon Oshira-sama for protection. Without the protection, some of the onryo will eventually possess the person who summons it. And you are not strong enough, it could lead to death like your friend Asayama.
As mentioned before, we did not summon onryo, we just played prank calls.
Grandma said it might not be the act of playing prank calls. It could be a portal where onryos thrive, and the phone booths had been opened up for them to leech on their human victims many years ago.
Numada then screamed, "This sounds like a curse!" The young Itako then ushered the parents out of the hall, set the quartet to sit side by side before instructing them not to turn their heads back no matter what. The young Itako then started simulating a shooting stance with her bow, like some kind of musical instrument. At this moment, everyone could hear a mobile phone ringing. Oh, it's mine. Just as Numada tried to reach for his phone in his pocket, he was halted by the Itako.
Please remember what I said. Keep still.
She said sternly. Numada could feel a pressure on his head and neck to lean towards the tatami mat, like a person's head is leaning on him. At this precise moment, the young Itako shot her imaginary arrow, yet everyone in the hall could hear a loud sound like an arrow hitting a target board. Just then, the phone stopped ringing, and Numada could feel like the pressure on his head had been alleviated. The pair of Itakos then told Numada's parents that the 4 of them had to stay within the shrine that night, if not they would be in grave danger.
Tonight, the 4 of you will be sleeping in this room as we invite Oshira-sama to provide protection. It is crucial for onryo to be ejected tonight. Oshira-sama does not appear in front of people who aren't Itako. If any of you happen to see him, he will retreat, and you will have to suffer the consequences. So do not step out the room, no matter what you heard.
What if I have a call of nature? The young Itako then handed them a traditional urinal bottle, much to the horror of the quartet. That night, there was no usual bantering while the air was heavy in the room. They tried to force themselves to sleep and hoped dawn would come soon and the nightmare would be over. Restlessness eventually wore them out, and as they were on the brink of slumber, they heard a commotion at the wooden walkway outside the room. It started with an onrushing bare feet towards the room before the owner of the footsteps were being picked up and slammed onto the stone pavement some distance away. Then a feeble yet familiar voice cried out.
Help me, Numada.
It was Asayama. No way, he's dead. Just as Sano and the other two was trying to figure out what they have heard, Numada was en route to open the sliding door without any reservations. Fortunately, the Tokyo trio were prompt to pin him to the ground before he succeeded. What are you guys doing? It's Asayama! He's crying for help! Come on, Numada, it is the trick of the Onryo. Asayama is dead. We just went to his funeral. Numada refused to listen to reasoning, and he had always been acting on his impulse. And this time, he was determined to bring Asayama into the room. Sano began to piss off and shouted at Numada. Can't you recall what the Itako said? It could be the Onryo imitating Asayama to catch us, or even it could be Asayama himself turning into a vengeful Onryo. This pissed Numada even more, and he mustered enough strength to shake off Murai and Takashima, who had a hard time holding him down. Sano then swiftly ran towards Numada and headbutted his impulsive friend, stifling whatever plan Numada had. While all this were going on within the room, on the other side of the paper sliding door, one could hear a scarecrow-like figure being hurled persistently on the ground, like a guardian blocking whatever or whoever from entering the room. No one knows how long all this commotion persisted, but eventually the noise from the courtyard died down, and the quartet also realized dawn had finally arrived. The four exhausted friends sat on their futon as the young Itako opened the sliding door, snickering at their distraught state. She told them all was over. The Onryo had retreated to where it was supposed to go. As they are slowly adjusting their eyesight after being blinded by the glaring sunlight, they could see a red traditional gown laid just outside the room, while on the sand beside the stone pavement, one could see a skid mark like someone was hurled onto it. On their way back, the awkwardness between Sano and Numada was still apparent, before Takashima broke the ice by asking the rest on whether they felt it was strange to begin with. What do you mean, Takashima?
Well, when Sano, Marui and myself played a prank call at random telephone booth, we had eerie encounters, even accidents. But after a while, life was back to normal without any previous consequences. Somehow, the person who brought us to the wretched telephone booth seems to set us up for these events.
The first thing they did when they reached Tokyo was to head straight towards the convenience store to find the manager. But the manager could not be found. Instead, they found his replacement.
Oh, you guys heard about what had happened to him?
The replacement asked them. We just came back from Iwate. What happened?
He was found hanging in his apartment, God bless. Oh yeah, when his landlord found his body, the mobile phone was ringing non-stop.
The end. How was the story? I first heard it when my idol Owang did his adaptation. I was enthralled by the story and it gripped me till the very end, making me determined to translate it and share with all of you with the blessing of the publisher and the author himself. Anyway, one would never expect something so playful and innocuous like doing a prank call would lead to such catastrophic repercussion. So better think before you act, boys and girls. As always, please continue to support us at Lights Out and email us if you have any stories to share or interested in our Bali trip in July. And subscribe to our YouTube and Spotify channels for our latest content. Have a good night and hope you don't receive any phone calls tonight. Might be a scam.